My name is Rick Sistio. I'm one of the pastors here at Windsor Baptist Church. We're glad to have you. We had the other group here about a month or two ago, and then I think Glenn contacted me initially and said, well, can we have a meeting here? I said, sure. The church takes no position on this, and but we're here for information, as far as I know. That's what we're here for. We're sure it's going to go well. If you have comments, I know there'll be a question and answer time, and we're here to learn and find out about this issue. The restrooms, there's a set of restrooms at their preschool wing, but they've got regular sized potties in there too, so you go back there if you need to, if you're in a hurry. The other two sets are in the fellowship hall. One's on the back right side, one's down the hallway to the left. There's also a drinking fountain down there. If you need to get some water, use the restroom, you can do that. I wouldn't be a good pastor if I didn't invite you to come visit our church if you don't have a home church. I've seen some of you, been out knocking on doors, and met several of you along the way. And, but we're pretty simple here. You can see what we got. We're simple, and we open the Bible and preach the Word. If you don't have a home church, I'd love to have you come. If you live at Orange Heights, you can go over there where, what's his name goes over there? Charles Blackwell at Orange Heights. So anyway, so we're glad to have you. We're going to open with a short word of prayer, and we'll have a meeting. Let's pray. Lord, we are thankful for the blessings you've given us. I pray that all of us will learn to count the blessings in life. And it doesn't mean we don't have problems. We're aware of that as well. But in most of our lives, you've been better to us than we deserve, and we thank you for that. We thank you for Jesus and what he did on the cross. I pray that we'll evaluate that in our lives. It's not about religion. It's about a relationship with Christ, and I pray that we'll all think about that as well. Now, bless the meeting. Pray that we'll get information. I think most of us, we're wanting to learn and hear what's going to be in this situation and how we can make a wise decision and be informed. I thank you for the people that are in the know. So bless Mike, others that might speak as they share the information here. May we have a good, calm, relaxed, informative meeting in Jesus' name. Amen? All right. Come on in and be seated. Much hard. Yes.
Can sit right here by can we sit here by you guys?
Okay, can everyone hear me in the back? We'll try to project in the back of the room. Everyone hear me okay?
I hear you.
Everyone see that reasonably well? We have hard copy maps here too. We're only going to show a couple of slides, and we have the hard maps if you want to come up later and look at them. Welcome to your community, ground zero for what we're here to discuss tonight. I want to start by thanking Pastor Ciccio, the good people of Windsor Baptist Church, for letting us use the facility. I want to thank you for taking time out of your day to come out and learn more about this proposal, which for better or worse, it passed, is going to have a huge and profound effect on your lives. A few ground rules. I just want to mention that we always encourage everyone to attend. We would love to see more of our opposition at these meetings. We would love to see representatives of Plum Creek at these meetings. We would like to engage in a series of dialogues or debates with Plum Creek rather than us individually speaking to you. We think that's a better way for you to be able to evaluate the information that's being put in front of you, but they have so far declined to do so. They're offered to them stands. We also have a standing offer as an organization. If anyone from Plum Creek or supporting them or even not supporting them sees or hears any factual misinformation that we have put out, something that is wrong on our website, our presentations, and our printed materials, if you let us know, we will correct it. We're here to try to encourage a factual dialogue between one plan that is being presented by Plum Creek and another plan that is being presented by Alachua County, essentially our comprehensive plan. We think that's a fair discussion. I also want to say that we've tried to engage all of our elected officials and candidates for public office. We encourage them all to come to our meetings. We try to engage them in dialogue. We plan to submit a questionnaire to all candidates to try to find out where they are on this incredibly important issue. Some candidates come to these meetings, and almost always do. Some do not. Some are here tonight. It's up to you to try to find out where your candidates and elected officials stand on this issue. It's going to affect you so much. With that out of the way, I'm going to get right to work here. I'm going to speak for about 45 minutes or so. I'm going to lay a lot of information on you, and then I'm going to stop, and I'm going to answer as many questions as you want to ask, and I'll stay as long as you'd like me to. Plum Creek. Plum Creek is a real estate investment trust. It's a special kind of corporation created by Congress It offers tax advantages to people who want to invest in land. They're big. They're the largest landowner in Alachua County. They're the largest landowner in the state of Florida. They're the largest landowner in America. They primarily grow timber. They grow trees. Over 90% of their land, that's what they do, because that's the most profitable way to hold land for their investors. They're a publicly traded company. Increasingly over the last decade or so, they, along with other real estate investment trusts, have turned more towards land speculation, which is essentially taking those parts of their holdings that they think they can make more money on by developing or selling or allowed to be developed, upzone, getting rid of it, and making money that way. And that's what's happening in Alachua County. Or at least that's the proposal that we're considering. A mix of growing timber, a mix of proposed development. They're not builders. Plum Creek does not build anything. They don't create jobs. They don't build things. They grow timber, and they get zoning and land use changed on land. They will then sell to others who will ultimately build or develop. I want to show you a couple of maps right quick. I'm a map guy. I think maps really convey a lot of information that would otherwise take a lot of time and effort to explain. Can everyone see that okay? It's Alachua County. Everyone recognize this? This is the same map. Some of you might be able to see it a little bit better. And what it does, and by the way, this map is based upon data from the St. Johns River Water Management District State Agency. This is the most recent, up-to-date information that Plum Creek is using in their application to the county as they're required to by law. This map is generated by county staff. And what it shows is wetlands. Wetlands and wetland buffers and 100-year floodplain superimposed over the map of the county. It also shows where the cities are, the municipalities. You can see that in the county drainage area. Let's take a look at that for a second. See this pointer?
Oh, there it is.
Not very good color.
Oh, there it is. Okay.
Yeah,
There it is.
point out this here. Point out here, and then you can look up there and see what I'm talking about. This area here, you'll notice there's kind of two broad areas in the county. This area here is kind of triangular area coming out from Gainesville. 95% of the population lives in that area in the county. And this big kind of swath of blue and white, a lot of blue, a lot of wetlands. Very little population there, mostly wet swamps, wet flatwoods. There's some agriculture, there's some, well, primarily silviculture and cattle farming. And there's a reason for that. The area that's all wet and kind of blue has a layer, a deep layer of clay underneath the ground. It's called the Hawthorne Formation, and it means that if water, rain falls there, it's not going to soak far into the ground. It stays on the surface. It pools up. And in the rainy season, these pools and lakes and areas get a lot larger, but they're very shallow for the most part. The land out to the west, where all the growth and development and population and the more profitable, generally, agriculture happens, is sand and lime rock. So the rain goes through, recharges directly to the aquifer. So that's why all the population's kind of out here. That's why all the, timberland, relatively inexpensive timberland and things like that are in the eastern or western part of the county. I get this to work. This is the eastern half of the county. You see Gainesville here on the left. And see the kind of, I don't know what color that is, a darker color. Was that reddish or something? But it shows Plum Creek's lands. These are all of Plum Creek's lands in the county, with the wetlands superimposed over them. The area we are sitting right here in Windsor. You see, this kind of surrounds us here. This is the area they are proposing to develop. They also have land up here. You see this area that's almost entirely butte or floodplain. This area over here, which is actually Murford Wellfield, they can't develop that. All this land down here has the development rights sold on it. It can't be developed. And then this land down here. These are the primary blocks of land we're going to come back to. Plum Creek likes to ask, they do ask in their envision the Alachua process, why here, why now? I want to briefly explain to you why here and why now. This all relates to the Panama Canal, believe it or not. Panama Canal is too small to allow for the passage of the large super tankers coming from China and Southeast Asia. They're really big ships now that carry most of the traffic. They can't get through the Panama Canal, so they have to stop on the west coast, offload all the materials, and then put them on trucks and rails and send them across the country. Well, the Panama Canal is being expanded. In the next year or two, a much wider, larger expansion will take place that will allow these gigantic super tankers to come through the Panama Canal. What that means is all the traffic and the stuff that you buy at Walmart, instead of coming from California, big boats are going to be sailing up and down the eastern seaboard, stopping at ports there. The big guys know that. The big economic interests know that. Jacksport, Jacksonville, stands to profit enormously from this. They anticipate a lot of new growth and development. They've been expanding, deepening. The railroad, CSX, they know this. They're getting ready. The state of Florida has plans to expand the road network, kind of radiating outward from Jacksonville. Now, land speculators, of course, what they do is they buy land cheap, where they think development and growth is going to come. They get in the way of the growth and development, and when the growth comes their way, they sell it for a profit. So Plum Creek, correctly, I think, anticipates that, look, some of that growth and development expansion is going to happen in the Hawthorne area. Let me point that out. You don't know where Hawthorne is. The CSX rail line comes right by there. It's also at the intersection of a state highway and a federal highway. And so they believe that in the future, their lands that are there, there's a possibility that as expansion comes out of Jacksonville and all this shipping and trucking and things that are happening out of these major new road and rail links, will also have a lot of manufacturing, factories, that kind of thing. They hope. So they're getting this land ready, just like people who own land all over that part of the state are doing. We're pretty far away from it here. But up in the I-10 corridor, where Plum Creek also has land, and I-95 going north and south, the same kind of thing is happening. People are getting their land ready for that by getting the zone changed. So that's the big picture. That's why here, that's why now, like a lot of other land speculators in this part of the state, Plum Creek is getting parts of their land ready to try to cash in on what they hope will be growth and expansion in this area. I'm here to talk about the comprehensive plan of Alachua County. Before all this started, how many of you had heard of the comprehensive plan of Alachua County? Okay, about that. We've all heard about it by the end of the night. The comprehensive plan, like all cities and counties in the state, we all have them. We're all, until recently, required by law to have them. Kind of designates the area in the county that are appropriate for growth and development. You know, where the industrial stuff should be that nobody wants to be beside, where the agriculture should be, where the conservation areas are that shouldn't be developed. And it assigns the rights to you based upon where your land is. All of Plum Creek's land is designated rural ag. Every acre of it in the Envision Alachua area. Rural ag means that it's appropriate for rural and agriculture. There are no commercial rights on any of this. You give it one housing unit, one development unit for every 5 acres of land that you own if you want to develop it, if you're in the rural ag area. Now, if you can get the land use on that changed by the county, then you can realize a lot more rights and potentially a lot more profit if the development actually happens. But of course, you, the taxpayers, everyone is responsible for making sure that new development has infrastructure, has roads, has schools, can handle the traffic, the sheriff can respond, all the public services. So all of you have a stake in how the land is zoned and where the growth happens. Also, if you buy into a certain part of the county expecting it to kind of be that way, if you like to live in the countryside, bought in the countryside, you have an expectation that a factory is not going to go in next to you. One of the things that land use and zoning help to do. They give you some predictability. What Plum Creek wants to do, I'll have to use that. In this area right here, so-called Envision Alachua area, or the footprint, employment-oriented mixed use, as they call it, is where they want to basically use all of their development rights, plus a lot more. Right now, they can build, by right, about 2,500 homes in this area. That's what they can do right now, theoretically. It's a theoretical right based upon the acreage. They have no commercial rights. What they're requesting from the county is the right to build 10,500 homes. So another 8,000 homes, plus 15.5 million square feet of commercial. Now, to give you a sense of what that means, Oaks Mall was about 1 million square feet. So that's the equivalent of about 15 Oaks Malls worth of area. I'm not saying that they're going to build 15 malls out here. Careful, everyone understands that. I'm accused of saying that. It's just to give you a sense of how much area we're talking about. So they want to go from 2,500 homes to 10,500 plus 15.5 million square feet of commercial. In order to be able to do that, they need some other things too. They need a relaxation of the environmental standards. Alachua County has more stringent wetland protections and natural resource protections than the state default minimum. All wetlands receive some protection under the Alachua County Comprehensive Plan. The state standards allow you to basically destroy anything under half an acre. Doesn't exist. Any wetland of any size can be destroyed under the state standards as long as you build an artificial wetland that holds an equivalent amount of water somewhere else. It's called wetland mitigation. The county comp plan doesn't allow that. There's some buffering differences too. Plum Creek told me in a conversation this morning that they have revised their policies and they're willing to follow the wetland buffer standards of the Alachua County. And I'll take their word for that for now. But there is a difference between the state and the county wetland buffers as well. The county wetland buffers are thicker. And of course they're going to have to do that because this is very, very wet land. In order to be able to build what they're striving, what they're going to build there, they're going to have to do some dredging, they're going to have to do some draining, they're going to have to do some filling. So that's what they want to change. Okay, enter, stand by our plan, the group that formed earlier this year. Plum Creek's been talking about this for 3 years, but they hadn't submitted any proposals. In December, they finally did. So we got to look at what they were actually proposing, including the numbers I'm telling you tonight. This group is not opposed to Plum Creek. It's not what we're about. We want them to stay here, be good corporate neighbors. They grow trees. We want them to keep on growing trees. Stand by our plan supports the county's comprehensive plan. That's why we call it that. We think the real discussion we need to be having is what Plum Creek proposing a good thing? We think the real discussion is, let's compare the outcomes under the existing comprehensive plan and what Plum Creek is proposing. Let's look at the factual differences and decide as a community which one's going to be better. That's why we exist, to inform the public about the differences. That's what we're doing here tonight. So we support the comp plan. We want Plum Creek to abide by the comprehensive plan like every other developer has to do. And I'll give you a few reasons why we think the comp plan is better, why we think it's better for the community as a whole. Might not be better for Plum Creek, but we think it represents the broader community's interest much more effectively. It's a broader context. Plum Creek's plan only looks at Plum Creek's land. Comprehensive plan looks at the entire county and places that in context along with everything else. It's been a much more open, lengthier public process that has led to the Alachua County Comprehensive Plan, public debates, public forums, and public buildings, with elections and candidates and voters getting to decide, and lawsuits back and forth that have led to the comprehensive plan. It's not perfect. I'd make a lot of changes in it if I could. All of you would probably as well. And no one in the community is happy with all of it. But if there's anything close to a real community consensus about how we ought to grow and change as a community, it's the comp plan. It's the best thing we have. It can be changed through elections. It can be changed by commissioners, subject to the will of the people. We think that's the way to go about doing this. And we think it provides a much broader context, a more accurate picture than Plum Creek's narrow process. So the question we think is this. Plum Creek asked this question. They sat down a task force and they put them around a table and submitted this to the community as well. Their question was, how do we build a city on our lands? How do we go about building and developing our lands? And they got a certain set of answers. The comp plan, we think, asks the more appropriate, broader, preliminary question. Where do we want to build cities? That's what you decide first, not how you want the city to look and how you want to do the development, but what are the appropriate areas for growth and development? What the comp plan recognizes, it didn't create this reality. It didn't create that, but it does recognize it. It takes it into account. And as a community, realizes that by far the better place for us to be building new population density, new growth. It's out here in the western part where the land can support it, where we have existing infrastructure, schools, roads, services. And then the other areas that are more appropriate for, we need rural, we need agriculture, we need country setting for people who want to live that way, we need natural resources, we need conservation areas. This is the area that's appropriate for that. That's the broader context. And I also want to point out, this area out here in the western part of the county, it's kind of like going out to Jonesville. Everyone know where Jonesville is? County Tioga, out on that part of the county. Goes out to about that. From there to the edge of the city limits is what's called the urban cluster by the comprehensive plan. And that's the area where the comp plan basically steers growth and development. Now, growth can happen out in other parts of the county. It can happen right here, but at lower densities. But if you're living out in that area and you have land out there, that's where the growth and development is going to happen. Just in the urban cluster, not the whole unincorporated county, but just in the urban cluster, we have enough capacity to handle over 50 more years of growth in Lasso County. That's residential and commercial. More than 50 years of capacity just there. And there's plenty more unincorporated area out there. And that doesn't take into account the cities. So my point there is the comp plan takes a very long-term view and provides resources, provides land for people to be able, for the community to be able to grow and develop for a long, long time in the future. What Plum Creek is proposing, or offering, is not something new, or not something that we don't have in this community, with one exception I'm going to talk about in a minute. They just want more of the same on their land rather than the rest of the county. So basically what we think is the fundamental problem with Plum Creek's proposal is that it is sprawl. I haven't used that word yet, but I'll use it now. Basically it just means growth and development, really intense, that kind of leapfrogs out from where the cities are, where the existing centers are, and plops down a new city or an urban center in the middle of the countryside. And that's bad for a number of reasons, no matter where it happens. It fragments the landscape. The natural ecosystems are broken up by the lights and the barking dogs and the homes and everything and the fences. People living in the countryside don't always get along with suburbanites. We have sprawl development. Usually the first thing that happens is the people who move into the new suburbs surrounded by cow pastures start complaining about the farmer's operation. He's up at 5 o'clock in the morning. I want to listen to the roosters, the smells. You've got inappropriate development and growth going on alongside one another. That's why it's good to have a plan, and that's why it's good to avoid sprawl. Sprawl also drives up the cost of public resources. All of you pay through your taxes for the consequences of sprawl. Development way out there costs a lot more to pick up the garbage, the sheriff to respond when there's a crisis or a problem, for fire emergency response. All the public services you pay for on a per capita basis are a lot more expensive with sprawl rather than with the more compact development that's happening where growth kind of moves outwards in an orderly manner from the cities. So generally, sprawl is bad. Plum Creek is proposing textbook sprawl. It is a long ways away from anything. And I'm going to give you the specifics on that here in just a sec. Plum Creek has spent a lot of time talking about the good planning concepts they want to incorporate into their development. And they're right, they're all good ideas. Things like clustering the development so that it all kind of comes onto a smaller part of the land and leaves open the more environmentally sensitive parts and leaves it as open space for the people who live there. It's a good idea. A mix of uses, commercial and residential close together so that people can actually walk or ride their bike if they want to go pick something up. They don't have to drive as far every day to take care of their basic needs. It's a good idea. More efficient use of the land, greater density. That's the market of the future. All over the country, people are realizing that some people want a big plot in suburbia. Some people don't. A lot of people, especially more and more retirees, more and more younger people, they don't want to have to take care of a big yard. They want to be able to walk around and things, and there's not enough supply of that, so all the developers are kind of moving in that direction. Plum Creek, that's what they want to do. They want to build that kind of development, walkable development. It's already happening around the county. And Yeah, okay, so all these good planning concepts they're talking about doing are great. We agree with them completely. The thing is, the comprehensive plan already requires those things. So all the good planning ideas that they're bragging about, they'd have to do if they were in the western part of the county as well, because they're just good ideas. So we support that. We just think it's in the wrong place. In fact, if you went through the Envision Alachua process, and if you're familiar with that, they kind of went through it, assembled a task force, and I talked about it a little bit. They asked people what you want for your community. Where are the areas where we should have growth? Which areas should we conserve? Where do we want the jobs? They did that process for their land, and they came up with a result. If you went through the same process for the county, you wind up with something like a comprehensive plan. Over here on the west, that's the area for the growth and the development and the population and the jobs. The place where you don't want that, where you want to maintain a natural resource-based economy, just happens to be Plum Creek's land. Because they bought 65,000 acres of swamp and wet flatwoods, and they want to do something else with it now. But that's where, from a county perspective, you have those conservation areas that Plum Creek themselves, they recognize it's important. They just break it up into a much smaller area where they want to build. So we agree with all the good planning concepts we're talking about. Our comprehensive plan would require that. One other point, and then I want to talk about some of the things that have gotten out there that we don't think are accurate or fair. It's important to remember we're talking about Plum Creek's lands right now in isolation. There are lots of little parcels in there that are owned by other people. There are lots of parcels all around there that are owned by other people. They're not part of this process. But if we move forward with Plum Creek's proposals, they're going to want in. The piggyback development, that's not part of the plan. If we make exceptions for Plum Creek, every one of those property owners is going to have a right to come ask the county commission for the same consideration. In 5, 10, 15 years from now, I don't know how we're going to say no. So we're not just talking about Plum Creek's land. It's important to remember that when you're listening to what they described. It's really this whole part of the county. And the corridors, there aren't many. There's just a few major roadways in this part of the county. There only can be so many roadways because of the way the land is organized and because of the... So we're going to have a lot of additional piggyback development that's not a part of the process we're describing now, if we take this big step of throwing out the rural ag criteria for this part of the county and letting Plum Creek build a city there. It's going to grow. It's going to grow fast if they're guessing right about the market. It's also important to remember that the Board of County Commissioners, at any given time in the future, it only takes 3 votes to change anything in the sector plan, unless there's a permanent conservation easement on the land, which is what they're proposing to do for some of the conservation areas. But all this area here where the growth and development is going to happen, it's really an abstract discussion that we're having right now. They don't build things. Okay? They get zoning rights and land use. They will sell pieces of their land to other people, and they will do the building. And 10 years from now, they will all have their own ideas about how they want to develop. If they want to change something in the sector plan, they can come to the county commission and ask for it. And that county commission will have no stake in this process we've gone through. They're likely to get it. So it's kind of a blank check. If we grant this process, there's really no telling what's going to happen. And this is important too. Once we do, there's no going back. It's the nature of the way land use and property rights happen in the state of Florida, all over the country. Once government grants development rights, can't get them back. All the specifics that we're all dying to know about, which wetlands are you going to destroy? Where are the roads going to be? Where's the subdivision going to be? All of that doesn't get answered until after the county commission makes a decision about whether to grant this proposal. That's just the nature of it. That's the way it's done. At this broad general phase where we're giving up the rights, we don't get those specific answers that we all want. It'll be later, when we can no longer turn back, that we'll hammer out the details at a different stage of the process. Quasi-judicial is more or less run by legal rules of court. County commissioners have very little discretion. It's on rails. One chance we have to actually say yes or no, because we think it's better or worse for the community, is right now. Once we make that decision, it's gone. And I want to say one final thing about the development proposal. Neither I, as your county commissioner, or the group stand by our plan, oppose the part around Hawthorne. See this area right here? See that pointer? It's kind of this little crescent-shaped area around the town of Hawthorne that we think is appropriate for growth and development. It's consistent with the comprehensive plan philosophy. It's adjacent to a city. It does not have these so-called strategic ecosystems, the really sensitive environmental areas that the rest of the land does. It's right on the rail line. It's right on the state highway and the federal highway. We think it's appropriate for growth. We think it ought to be developed under some set of criteria. We think Hawthorne ought to annex it. So we're not opposed to the entire thing. It's all this stuff out in soggy areas. It's really not much different from anything else that's been going on in the county that we're opposed to. I should also mention, since I mentioned the cities, and one of the problems with sprawl, growth, and development that we're talking about here is that sprawl hurts cities. That's the one absolute constant. Sprawl drains away energy, investment, people from the cities. They decay. How many of you were here in the Gainesville area, living here 20 years ago? Remember what downtown Gainesville used to be like? Ghost town, boarded up. You know how that happened? Why it happened? I-75. How many of you were here when I-75 was built? 68, 70, 70, 71, something like that. Westward sprawl. That major new corridor grew all the growth and development out to that part of the county. At that time, that was Sprawlsville. Really hurt downtown. The city's just now coming back. It's coming back strong. A lot of it because the development's now moved so far out, it's impractical for people to actually live way out there and work in Gainesville. So they're running into some constraints. More people are coming back downtown. They want to live in Gainesville. Again, that younger and older crowd that want more of a traditional walkable type neighborhood, they're moving back into cities. It's just happening all over the country. So sprawl hurts cities. We think that if they build this thing out in the middle of the swampland out here, it's going to have the same effect on downtown Gainesville that I-75 did, just when the city's starting to get its legs back under it. I'm going to pass this around. We don't have a PowerPoint slide on this, do we? No. This comes from Plum Creek's sector plan. All it does is it puts a big bullseye right here on downtown Gainesville, which is like less than a mile from East Gainesville, by the way. I'm going to talk about that in a little bit too. Downtown Gainesville, University of Maine, East Gainesville, less than a mile away. And they kind of do these rings out here to show you how far everything is from Gainesville. So we lifted this right from their sector plan. And what it tells you, to give you a sense of scale, Hawthorne, where they want to do one of their primary kind of jobs-oriented centers, where they're promising a lot of jobs that are going to help people, 16 miles from downtown Gainesville. Progress Corporate Park in Alachua, y'all know where that is? It's only 14 and a half miles. Okay. Where we are now, the Plum Creek, so-called Plum Creek Windsor tract, 11 and a half miles from downtown / East Gainesville. I-75 is only 5 to 8 miles, depending upon what part of the interstate you're on. And the reason I'm making that point is to show you how far out this is, and the argument that is made that this is going to be important for the people of East Gainesville, address economic disparity. We think they're using people. And frankly, we don't think the burden of proof is on us to prove why this is not going to help East Gainesville when it's 15 miles away. If all the growth up and down I-75 and Jonesville, which is closer, in town of Tioga and everywhere else, didn't help East Gainesville, how is this? Connect the dots. Show us how it's going to happen. They can't. So we're just leaving it at that. We don't think it's our job to prove they can't do it. It's our job to prove how that's going to happen. I'm going to pass this around. I know you've seen it, just whatever. Take a look at it. Give you a sense of the scale that we're talking about here. Okay. And now, as this has happened, Plum Creek's been here for 3 years. They spent hundreds of thousands of dollars making their case directly to the public. And they had the message entirely to themselves. They were able to completely control the message for a long time. No critical media, no one really questioning anything. It's not really until this group, Stand By Our Plan, got started, that a different message started getting out there. The Envision Alachua Task Force, it's the first thing they did. It's part of their planning documents. It's the way they approach these controversial issues. By the way, they've done this in other places around the country. It's always really controversial. They did a big one in Maine. It was a big one in Maine. It ended up going to the state Supreme Court. It was that divisive and controversial. They learned some lessons. What they like to do is very consciously come into a community, handpick a group of people to be representative of the community. This is the task force. And then they ask these people, what do you want us to do in your community? Very broad, general question. Every community says the same thing. And we all want jobs, good paying, blue collar jobs. But we want to protect the environment. We want economic growth and better education, but we want recreational opportunities for ourselves and our kids. Every community wants the same thing. That's what our community says, well, that's what we want. And the Plum Creek strategy, basically, is to take that, print it up in a body, and say, this is what you want. This is what you, the community, wants, not us. And then they begin formulating the details. I'm not going to say too much about the task force. I don't mean to criticize any of them individually. They're fine people. I'm sure they're convinced they're doing the right thing. But this is a group, 20 or so people, who never disagree on anything. I've watched their meetings. You can too. They're online. They don't ask skeptical, critical questions. They don't take votes. 9 to 5, let's do this. It doesn't work that way. They're unified. They all seem to, even though the community is deeply divided, the idea that this task force is representative, they don't have people like me on it. Everyone on that task force seems to get along and all agree about everything that's going on. They never object to anything. They steadfastly, Plum Creek and the task force, made a point of ignoring our organization since we got started. We don't exist. They never say anything about it. They won't come to debates. They won't come to these meetings, even though we always invite them. But for some reason, at the last task force meeting, they spent 45 minutes or so pouting, basically pouting, about the terrible rumors that were going on out there in the community, the misinformation. They didn't come out and say that our group was responsible, but they implied that anyone who's opposed to what they're doing can only be so because they believe in these wacky, crazy rumors. Now, I'm only going to mention a few to make sure you know they're not coming from us, because you're going to be hearing it. They've got a lot of money to say whatever they want. Okay, our group, everything we believe, everything we say in these meetings, it's all on our website. It's all in print. We have a standing offer again to them to correct any factual misinformation. We have never said they're going to build 15 malls. Okay, the closest thing we have come to is to giving you that sense of the mall is 1 million square feet, so 15 times 15. We've never claimed they're going to do fracking on their lands. That's another one that they're pointed out. It's out there. It's all their opponents believe there's going to be fracking. We've never said anything about cutting down all the trees, condemning land, and building Section 8 housing. That's one of my favorites. I had not heard these rumors. I've been deeply involved in this. I heard it for the first time from the task force. There's some other things that are saying that are like that. I just bring that up to point out to you that everything we're saying is on our website, and you're hearing it tonight. It's very open. We can't be responsible for everything that everyone believes. And, of course, people are scared. They're concerned. They're worried about what's happening. These things always happen. There are rumors flying on both sides of this discussion. We want to talk about the facts. There's some crazy things being said about people who support Plum Creek, but we don't blame it on them. So we want to point out that there's the task force saying these things. It's not really about stand by our plan. We want to take them on head-to-head in a factual conversation like this, but they don't want to do it. So I'm going to leave that at that. No more task force. A few of the things that have been created, we kind of refer to as myths. Again, they had 2.5 years to themselves and kind of established the boundaries of what we're going to talk about. And they're now saying it in the presentations, and they've scared a lot of environmentalists with this. They're saying that because they have the right to build those homes, and on all of their land, not just the Envisioned Alaska area, but on all of it, they have the right to build upwards of 9,000 homes. Now that's over 60,000 acres, so it's really spread out, but that's what they could theoretically build. And they have told the environmental community, if you don't give us what we want, and remember, I told you that they want to do all their development here, and then they're promising to give up the development rights here and put a permanent easement on it. And they're going to give up this area down here and put a permanent easement on it. All this over here is already undevelopable. The previous owner, Georgia Pacific, sold all the development rights to the state. Almost 40% of Plum Creek's lands cannot be developed already. That one doesn't get in there very often. But they sold the rights to the state. before Plum Creek bought it, at fair market value. So they're saying that if we don't let them concentrate their city here, they're just going to spread out their homes all over here, and all over here, and all over here. It's going to be like peanut butter across the land, and you'll have little chopped up subdivisions, which if you're an environmentalist should be a great concern, called fragmentation of the habitat. It breaks up the movement of wildlife. There's no place for the big critters to live. It causes a lot of problems. It's bad for the environment. The problem with this is that this area, the area up here, if you look at it, you can't even see the red. You kind of see the outlines. What you see is blue. What you see is wetlands, wetland buffers, and 100-year floodplain. Just because you theoretically have the right to develop that land, and if it's, let's say, it's about 10,000 acres, which theoretically gives them the right to about 2,500 homes, you can't build them there if there are environmental constraints. And you're not going to build them there if there are economic constraints. So there's two different things we're talking about. Regulations that prohibit certain things and economic realities that make certain things impossible or unlikely. And the way it's done, the way the comprehensive plan works is you can't destroy wetlands. Now, if you own a gigantic wetland, let's say this entire 10,000 acres was one big wetland, you are allowed to build a home there. You're allowed to destroy enough to live there if you own the land. But that's it. So theoretically, if it was all wetland, you could put one home on it. The reality is that it's closer to Plum Creek, and their consultants are kind of arguing with staff right now and trying to figure out what the exact percentages are. But it's over half wetland, easily. Over half wetland and buffer, probably significantly more. Of what remains, somewhat less than half, it's all strategic ecosystem, and it's all a rural, it would be a rural subdivision, so they have to cluster on half of the land. So now you're down to about maybe 20% of the land that's left that could theoretically be developed. Now, if you're going to put in a subdivision, you've got to have roads. You have to have paved, county standard roads. You can't just build dirt roads and put in a subdivision anymore. Against the comprehensive plan. Perhaps more importantly, you have to have stormwater. Stormwater ponds take up a lot of room in a typical subdivision. And in flat, wet areas like this, they take up a lot of room. Because you can't dig down deep, to hold the water. If you get down very far, you're going to hit water. So it's got to be a very large, relatively flat area to hold the stormwater. And then there are standard buffers and things that you have to do, even if there wasn't a comprehensive plan. Also, you have to have at least 1 acre to put a septic tank on your property. Another comprehensive plan requirement. You have to have just one good hydro acre to put a septic tank. And this would have to be mounded tanks, of course. You all probably know what those are. More expensive, harder to build. Long story short, there are other issues. There are other constraints. Long story short, they're not going to develop that land. Challenge them on this. If that's their threat, give us what we're asking for. We're going to spread subdivisions out in the countryside, all up there, all down here, and harm the environment. Either we will or someone else will, sell the land to someone else. Then we're calling their bluff. No one's familiar with this land and familiar with the constraints imposed by the environment, who builds homes and develops things, seriously believe they can do anything with that land. Maybe a little. Maybe a few high-dry pieces near to roads where they could have direct access to existing roads, although there is no paved road access to that area up there. It's called the Northeast Flatwoods. Some of you are familiar with that area. So for economic reasons and development reasons, they're not going to build on that land. So what does that mean? That means their threat of environmental doomsday is not valid. They're only going to be able to build a small fraction of those homes, and it'll have to be clustered, and they can't hurt wetlands. So if they do that over all of their land holdings, even the relatively drier area here in the middle, it's still going to be a lot better for the environment. A lot less overall growth and development. It has to be built in a way that protects the best areas where wildlife can move through the landscape. It's going to be a lot better. But the reality is very little is going to happen down here or up here. This is what Plum Creek is offering to give up. They're offering to give up the development rights on those two big blobs of land if the county will let them build 8,000 more homes here and 15 million square feet of commercial. That's the deal they're offering. It's not a very good deal, we think. Because we're going to be paying them hugely for something, to not do something that they can't do anyway. So we don't think that's a good deal for the community, and we don't think the environmental argument works very well. The other part of that they're saying, they've made this big promise about they're going to put 87% of their total land into conservation. How many of you have heard that claim? I'm curious, I don't know how it's getting out into the community. Okay, some of you, now you've all heard it. They've promised to put 87% of their total land into conservation.
No, it's over 90%. That's the most recent claim.
Okay, I don't know. I heard 87% this morning. But they may be including things like civic space and stormwater inside the developed areas. I don't really know how they're getting that figure exactly. But 87%, and that attracted the attention of a lot of environmentalists. That sounds like a good deal. We can permanently protect 87% of the land if we just give up 13%. The problem is if they develop under the comprehensive plan, for some of the reasons I've already discussed, I'll tick them off here again in a hurry, that's about what they'd have to say anyway, because of the nature of their land. They're not giving anything up. It's not like the shareholders of Plum Creek are big-hearted environmentalists who want to do a favor for the people of Alachua County. That's not what they do. They maximize return on investment for their shareholders. That's what they do for business. So their offer to give up 87% of their land is on land that they can't develop anyway. Again, over half, and again, we're debating this, but somewhere between just under or significantly over, half of their land is undevelopable wetland or wetland buffers. What remains, you're going to have to set half of it aside. You're going to have to cluster it, protect the ecosystems. So you're down to about 25% of the land. And then, with what's left, oh yeah, and then taking into account the 38% that they've already surrendered all the development rights on, again, almost 40% they can't develop anyway, 40% of that 87%. So you put all those things together, you're at about 10 to 15% they can actually build on. So they're not giving anything up. It's important to recognize if you're concerned about the environmental aspects of this. And then also, when they say they're going to put it into conservation, it's important to know what that word means. You know, for most of us, when we hear the word conservation, we're probably thinking of a nice, pretty forest. You can go with your kids, walk around, take pictures, go for a hike in the woods, be trails. Plum Creek grows trees. There's nothing wrong with forestry. My father was a forester. But they practice industrial silviculture. So that means they clear cut big chunks of land, they till the ground into rows, they plant genetically selected pine trees that are virtually identical in tight little rows, and they grow up and they apply a lot of herbicides to keep down the competing vegetation. It's like a cornfield, more than a forest. That's what they mean for that 87%. They're going to practice industrial silviculture and continue to do that. It's not conservation. So again, if you care about the environment, you have to ask, what are we getting for this? Is there any environmental benefit to putting this land into Plum Creek's kind of environmental conservation? And we think the answer is no. They've also made a claim recently, they're making this claim that their kind of development is going to be more resource efficient than what's going on in the western part of the county. They're going to use less water per capita. That's the main thing they're talking about, is the water. There are a couple of problems with what they're saying. First of all, they're taking averages from all of suburbia going back X number of years in the western part of the county and looking at water consumption there and then comparing it to what they're proposing to do. Well, what they should be looking at is what the comprehensive plan now requires. They shouldn't be comparing it to suburbia out in Jonesville. They should be comparing it to the things the county is now approving. Celebration Point, Spring Hills, Santa Fe Village, Newberry Crossing, the big developments, mixed use, higher density, on transit line kind of development that the market is really demanding now, and the developers are building up and down the I-75 corridor. That's the honest comparison. But even more importantly, they're claiming that because irrigating grass is a huge discretionary use of water. Most of the water that is wasted is from water that you don't really need, but you do it because you want to have a green lawn. And they're claiming that in their subdivisions, they're not going to allow that. They're not going to allow non-Florida friendly landscaping. And they're not going to allow people to irrigate the grass. county law, there is nothing in the state law that would allow them to do that. It's your yard, you can plant anything you want, and you can water anything you want. So when they talk about these abstract ideas, if we're going to encourage everyone to use less water, and we're going to have some impressive sounding comp plan language in there, it's important to remember they can't back any of it up. All they can do is try to have more compact, dense development with smaller yards, and that does use less water, but that's what the county's doing anyway. That's what they're going to be competing with in the western part of the county. On top of that, the average person out in this area is going to be burning a lot more gas. They're going to have to drive a long way to get to just about anything, even though they're going to have supposedly mixed commercial areas spotted in there, and that's true, but it's not the kind of place where most of the jobs are actually going to be. It's not where your schools are going to be. Most of these people are going to get up in the morning, get in their car, they're going to drive right through East Gainesville on their way to their job at the University of Florida. Okay, so we're going to be doing more per capita driving than all the development out to the west side. So we think it's actually the other way around. We stick with the comp plan. The per capita consumption of water and energy and fuel in particular are going to be less than if we do this for all. I talked about East Gainesville a little bit. They don't really need to see more about that. Again, we think the burden of proof is on them. Show us how these jobs, which they're not going to create, they're going to sell the land to someone else. They're not going to have some little asterisk down at the bottom of the contract that says you have to employ people from East Gainesville. It's 15 miles away. How are you going to make that happen? You can't enforce that. Close with this. There's been a lot of discussion and debate in this community about what Plum Creek's going to do. What are their long-term intentions? Are they in it for 50 years like they say they're going to be? What are their commitments? What do they mean to the community? The local people they've hired, nice people, friendly people, they're saying one thing. They're saying the task force is in charge and is going to make all the big decisions. For this huge Seattle-based corporation, the local task force is going to make all the big decisions. Well, the CEO of the company has something else to say. His name is Rick Holly, and he gave an interview to analysts and investors in Atlanta a few months ago. And here it is. There's a link at the bottom if you want to read the whole story. Can everyone read that? I'm going to step through it with you because some of it's code speech. One of the key initiatives for the company over the past several years has been the entitlement of our most valuable development properties. Entitlement means zoning land use. Up the zone. It's worth it. Holly told the analyst. Through the pursuit of these entitlements, we change the very nature of these assets and create long-term value for shareholders. We do not intend to pursue vertical development, building, construction, that's what that means, or invest a significant amount of capital into these properties. This can get zoning changes, what that means. Rather, our strategy is to spend time and effort to move these properties up the value chain through entitlement and capture the value. Zoning increase, sell it. And then he goes on to talk about their largest, hottest development opportunity right now, which is in Alaska County, Florida, right here where we are. Now, this is what corporations do. Nothing in the world wrong with that. They're making money for their shareholders, that's what they're supposed to do. But I think our community needs to understand this is the strategy. It's not the pleasant, nice, friendly local people in the task force who are going to be making the decisions. It's not. Okay? It's going to be the corporate management of Plum Creek. And as we move through this thing over the next 5, 10, 15, 20, 25 years, they will continually make decisions based upon changing market conditions to make as much money as they can. And it's a process that has a lot of loopholes, a lot of guarantees about what's going to go in and be built. Those long-term commitments they're making, they don't mean anything. They're going to make as much money as they can. The money they're spending now is a means to an end. And that's to get their zoning change. And they do this. They do this all over the country. I'm going to close this out now by just telling you what's going to happen next. And then I'm going to stop talking and answer as many questions as I can. This is a legislative decision. It means your county commission is going to decide. The county commission recently decided that we're going to have some public, well, let me back up a second. They formally submitted their application and staff is now analyzing it. It's huge. It's going to take several months. And before they bring it to the county commission or anyone else, the county commission directed staff to make some public presentations. For staff, not me, not Plum Creek. County staff will make presentations directly to the public about what's proposed, what their recommendation is, and then people can ask questions. There are going to be 4 of them. There's going to be 2 in the downtown county administration building. There's going to be 1 somewhere in East Gainesville. There's going to be 1 somewhere in Hawthorne. This is September, maybe October, probably September. Then it's going to go to an advisory board called the Planning Commission, which is the county commission appointed group that basically does the same thing the county commission does. It's sort of as a preview. Plum Creek will make their presentation. County staff will make their presentation along with their recommendations. The Planning Commission will participate. The public can participate and ask questions. It'll go to them several times for as many public hearings as they think you need to have at the county administration building. And then they'll pass it along to the county commission with the recommendation. And the county commission at that point can do 1 of 3 things. We can reject it completely and it's open. We can approve it and send it off to the state for review. There's more to come, but we do. Or we can approve it with changes. Make some changes and say, okay, now we're going to transmit it to the state. So if we don't kill it at that point, it'll go to the state. The state will take a quick look at it. They don't really do planning anymore. They don't care. They're just going to look to make sure that their resources, their road network or whatever, is not affected. And then it comes back to us. It takes a couple of months. It comes back to the county commission. We're into next year now, January, February. Then the county commission will have as many public hearings as it takes until we decide what to do. The public will be invited. It'll probably take 1 night to present the thing, another night for Plum Creek to do their thing, and the public can have as many questions as they want, and the county commission will begin to talk about it. So that'll take 2, 3, 4, 5 years, and then the county commission will decide next year what's going to happen. We can approve it, we can deny it completely, we can make a counter offer. So we are trying very hard to make this issue a campaign topic. Not at all apologetic about that. This is the only chance you're going to get to affect this. If you support this strongly, if you oppose this strongly, you need to know that your county commissioners are going to make the decision. And there are some open seats this August and November. So it's your job as a citizen to find out where the candidates stand. If you care about this, find out where they stand. Do they support this? Are they skeptical? Do they refuse to take a position? You know, all these things mean something. It's your job to find out where the county commission candidates stand, because this election, primarily the one in August, the primary, the August 26th election, that's where this thing's going to be decided. The outcome of that election will decide how this thing is going to be approached. So I urge you to find out who the candidates are, consider what's going on with them individually. And then finally, the end game, we think, where should this go? Because Plum Creek is threatened. They basically said, if this county commission says no, we'll wait you out. We'll wait a couple of years. We're a big corporation, and we think in glacial terms. So we'll just come back 2 years from now and try again. And that's what they'll do. In fact, they'll probably, if it looks like it's headed for a defeat, they'll probably just withdraw the application and wait. So if, like me, you believe this is not a good thing for the community, at least not in its current form, and we hope this county commission votes this down or rejects it, we're going to be back in 2 years, 4 years, 6 years, trying again. This is a long-term process. Ultimately, we think what needs to happen for those lands that are the most important environmentally and for the integrity of the local communities, we think it needs to be bought by the public. That's the way you really do it. Put it in permanent conservation the way we've already done. Plum Creek has sold some of their land to Alachua County already. Alachua County Forever bought some parcels from them. That's the way you ensure the long-term protection of this. Not all of it. It's not necessary to take all of their land. A lot of it will always be suitable for timber. We don't think they can build on it. You take the areas that are causing the most concern, you buy it. We've got an Alachua County Forever referendum probably coming again in a couple of years. We've got a state land conservation referendum on the ballot this November. But we need to win some elections first, if you feel this way about it. Until Plum Creek is convinced that we can sustain a political consensus in this community, they're probably going to keep trying for a few times. And then eventually, it's not personal. It's not like they had their feelings hurt. They're a corporation. They're going to do what's in their best interest. We think we can bring them to the table if we can keep winning elections and ultimately make them a good offer and take that land and put it into permanent protection. If you live out in this area, you're concerned about the long-term prospects, you need to know this is a long haul. Got to pay attention this time, got to pay attention 2 years from now, got to pay attention 4 years from now, and then watch for that land referendum where we can ultimately buy it from them and everyone goes away happy. I'm done. I appreciate your kind attention. You've been very attentive. I'm going to stay here and answer as many questions as you have. either in the group or I'll say afterwards, if you want to ask me something in private. Thank you.